On that alleged altercation between Arlington National Cemetery staff and members of the Trump campaign. For more, we're joined now by CBS News Pentagon reporter and producer Ellie Watson. Ellie, great to have you here on America Decides. So you cover the Pentagon so closely. They help oversee Arlington National Cemetery, such a sacred spot in this country. What are the facts, at least what we know at this point, about what happened? I was actually at Arlington National Cemetery, keeping an eye on that ceremony. I did not see what happened over in Section 60 where this altercation occurred. I was just there by the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, so didn't see it. But what have we learned about what actually happened over there in Section 60, which is really a spot that has a lot of sensitivity because recent service members killed are buried there?
Right. Well, we do know that the cemetery has filed an incident report, and defense officials tell us that's because members of the Trump campaign staff were aggressive both physically and verbally towards a cemetery staffer. That staffer was trying to enforce rules that prohibit campaigns from filming at grave sites across the cemetery, but especially at Section 60. Section 60, as you noted, is an emotional spot in the cemetery for so many because it is where many young veterans killed in Iraq and Afghanistan are buried. The Trump campaign denies that any incident occurred and that the campaign had explicit permission from the families to be in Section 60. However, federal law, according to the cemetery, dictates those guidelines, and the cemetery staff is very strict at enforcing them so that the burial sites of so many veterans who have sacrificed their lives under administrations, regardless of party, are not used as political props.
Ellie, help us understand the dynamics here. You have a former commander-in-chief, not just a former president, but he's, as we all know, also the commander-in-chief at Arlington National Cemetery. So he is a former military official, in effect, as a former president of the United States. You have Arlington National Cemetery, the Defense Department. How is something like this adjudicated inside of the federal government, inside the Pentagon, if at all?
We do know that that incident report has been filed. The cemetery says they're not going to release any more information because they do want to protect the identity of the individual involved. But you can be sure that many news organizations will request that incident report from the Pentagon, from the local police departments through the Freedom of Information Act.
Ellie, you're busy covering the Pentagon. Other colleagues of ours are busy covering the political scene. And Senator J.D. Vance, former President Trump's running mate, has weighed in on this altercation today. Let's listen.
I think, first of all, the altercation at Arlington Cemetery is the media creating a story where I really don't think that there is one. There is verifiable evidence. There is verifiable evidence that the campaign was allowed to have a photographer there. There's verifiable, they were invited to have a photographer there. There's verifiable evidence that the families of these poor people who had their loved ones die 3 years ago at Abbey Road, Abbey Gate, those 13 Americans, a lot of them were there with the president. They invited him to be there.
Ellie, can you help us get some context here when Senator Vance references Abbey Gate? What exactly happened at the airport in Afghanistan in 2021?
Right, so Monday did mark 3 years since a suicide bombing at the airport in Kabul killed 13 U.S. service members during the final days of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Former President Trump was at Arlington with some of the Gold Star families and some of the Marines who survived that bombing in 2021. Former President Trump has really seized on the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan as exhibit number one of the weaknesses of a Biden-Harris foreign policy. The Biden administration has pushed back, saying that the withdrawal from Afghanistan was inevitable once the Trump administration cut a deal with the Taliban. And it's worth remembering that former President Trump does have a track record of making demeaning comments about military service members, including calling those captured or killed suckers and losers. So his appearance at Arlington on Monday could have been a controversy under any circumstances, even if we weren't in the final stages of this election season.
Ellie Watson, we appreciate